Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today we want to review this mini PC, and I hope this video is going to be one of the most honest mini PC reviews you're ever going to see. Now why is that? That's quite a bold statement, right? Well, because I do not want to review this device. This is the Minisforum X1 mini PC. It's a little powerhouse mini PC, and frankly I don't care. I care about this device as a network attached storage device, and in order for me to get hold of one of these from Minisforum so I could review it here on the channel as a NAS, because frankly the internal performance and hardware on this is insane, they asked if I could do a mini PC review. I don't do mini PC reviews, I generally don't really do that. I look at these and I see how they're going to run for Proxmox, for Unraid, for TrueNAS and for flash storage. But in order to get it, I had to do this mini PC review. So strap in, my friends, and it's time to review this device in the most harsh, critical and annoyed way possible. So that rather indulgent and petulant introduction aside, let's talk about this. So it arrives at a comparable kind of volume size to that of the MS A1 or MS O1. I would argue it's slightly more square. The other one's a little bit slight fraction more rectangular. On the front, we have got a touch button here that can be utilized for fingerprint to log into the device immediately. So you can either choose to just log in, one touch and you're in, or you can enable things like pins and more to add multi-layer access to your system. We've also got an SD card slot built there into the side, and on the front of the system we've got multiple USB ports there, 10 gig USBs, USB 4 on the front and the back. We've got an audio in and out, and we have a co-pilot button there, something we'll talk about in a lot more detail later on. On the rear of the system we have got two 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports. We've got a DisplayPort and HDMI output there, again 60 frame 4K, easily done. And on the rear we've got that other USB 4 port, an Oculink port and another USB port, a USB 2 port. Straight away, one of the things I want to highlight that I like about this, and it's one of the reasons I want to use this as a flash NAS for that follow-up video, it's got an internal PSU. It's a lovely modular slot in PSU internally. It is custom made to the system, but it's 140 watt PSU. That means this mini PC, despite its powerhouse CPU inside, which again we'll chat on more later, 12 core, 24 thread, that CPU inside there doesn't have a bulky external PSU. It goes straight into your standard 2-pin adapter there on the rear. It's not going to make replacing that PSU very easily. It's definitely not an off-the-shelf number, but at the same time, it is going to be great to see this system deployed with the kind of minimum cable fuss there. Talking of minimum cable fuss, it also arrives with a bracket plate to mount this on the rear of your monitor straight away included inside. So again, this isn't going to be a big bulky PSU to fall off the desk and disconnect you when you don't want it. I like this design. Now, we can't really drill into what makes this mini PC claim to stand out more than any others before we tackle one of two main areas. And that first one is to do with the CPU internal hardware, etc. Now, that CPU inside there is an AMD Ryzen 9. It's an AI specialized one, and that is the HX370. That is, as mentioned, a 12-core, 24-thread processor. So that's 8 efficiency cores, 4 power cores that can be clocked up to 5.1 gigahertz. It also has a 2.9 gigahertz integrated graphics engine there as well, those Radeon graphics to play with. Now all of that adds up to its capability to run a fairly large number of modern games, as well as of course AI processes with a reported 50 TOPS or tera operations per second reported by that. Now a big part of that is going to be about how you use AI assistance on this. Is it going to be standard verbose LLM retrieval, or if you're going to be using it for content generation, both of which we'll explore later. In terms of memory, this system arrives, or at least I got it with 64 gig of DDR5 SODIMM memory. It has 2 physical SODIMM slots, something of a rarity in mini PCs where you do often find pre-attached memory inside. Sadly, that is not ECC memory, which, you know, in the mini PC side of things is less of a problem, but for me as a NAS lover, I'm not going to be a fan of that, but more on that on a different video. But it does mean that you can scale this up to 96 gig if you choose to, and that's 5600 megahertz DDR5 SODIMM as well. And it arrives with 2, or at least this one did, 2 sticks of 32 gig crucial DDR5 memory as well. So lovely stuff. Now for power consumption, obviously that internal PSU being 140 watt, we've got a cap there, but in terms of traditional utilization, the CPU had a reported TDP of between 15 and 54 watts from the official AMD pages. How did that translate to in real terms? Well, in idle, when we had a Windows 11 set up there that it arrived with on an OS drive, just left idle, it went as low, and by the way, low with massive italic marks there, between 19 and 23 watts. Now, I say that's low, realistically it is not low. This is a system with a lot under the bonnet, and unfortunately for domestic Windows use, that is just extraordinarily high. You have to factor in quite an aggressive CPU we're dealing with here, and of course we are dealing with a system with multiple M2 NVMe slots that I have populated. Nevertheless, 19 to 23 watts definitely pushes this out of domestic day-to-day use and definitely into power user categories there. Now, when we had the CPU running at above 50% and the GPU being utilized as well as one drive, we got the power utilization up at 59 to about 63 watts on average between the two, dancing over the course of a minute of benchmarking there. Now, the benchmarks will be done later on that you'll see, but still nonetheless, it is quite a power-consuming device when you want to push it, but as a system with a decent enough CPU and integrated graphics on board and the opportunity for scale-out via Oculink, we have to factor in that these power numbers have to be comparable to that of quite a high-performance PC rather than traditional mini PCs. Now, I mentioned earlier on about multiple storage slots. This system has 3 M.2 NVMe slots inside, all Gen 4 architecture there. Now, 2 of them are Gen 4 times 4, so that's going to give you, 8 gigabytes per second to play with there. But one of them seemed to be listed at Gen 4 times 1. And when I went into the BIOS, there was the opportunity to change a lot of the configuration there, but still nonetheless, out the box, you will have those 2 slots at 4 times 4 and 1 slot at 4 times 1. So maybe one of those drives can be more of an archival drive, or one of them can be for a hot disk or a scrap disk, but 3 M2 NVMe slots inside this mini PC, given the rest of the hardware architecture inside, is pretty darn impressive. But of course, it doesn't stop there in terms of scalability over time. We've got to talk about it. We've got to talk about that Oculink port there. Now, the Oculink port there ultimately allows you bolt-on PCIe level accessories there. In the same way a traditional desktop PC would have a PCIe slot to slam in a graphics card, slam inside a NIC upgrade card there. Oculink allows you to do that externally and does mean that your base level system can remain quite small like this one. So I tested several different appliances there. I went ahead and tested an external M.2 NVMe adapter here via Oculink. This is from Ustar. This has got 4 M.2 slots. Plugged it in, worked straight away, and we are able to see 7 total M.2 NVMe drives inside this system. That scalability is definitely going to be something I want to touch on the NAS video, but I think most users are going to be interested in something like this. This is an external graphics card here. This is also from Minisforum. We've done a review of this before. Hopefully the thumbnail's there on screen. And getting that connected in does mean that this mini PC can be scaled up in terms of its graphical capabilities significantly. And if you don't want to be locked in with a pre-attached card like this one, you can just get an Oculink 2 external PCIe with power input to add pretty much any graphics card you're going to want. And that the integrated graphics on board are still pretty darn good on their own. So in order to test how that would go and how it would benefit from an external GPU, we went ahead and did some testing with Call of Duty Warzone. We set it to the high performance mode with both of these setups here, and we ran Call of Duty Warzone there, just the opening segment of the game for about a minute and a half, with all of the settings on high. One with the integrated graphics and one set up with the external graphics there. And although the CPU utilization was a little bit of an anomaly, has to be said that it of course ran higher with the external GPU. We would have expected that. However, it's the fact that this on its own was able to run Call of Duty Warzone at the higher settings is what really impressed me. So we dug down deeper into can I run it with the base level system just to see how well it would run. And although it's not exactly going to be running Cyberpunk at top end anytime soon, for a mini PC to run some of the games that this was listed on that page was nonetheless impressive for me. When we are talking about a mini PC, that when they talk about a gaming mini PC, this has got the chops to back that statement up. And carrying on the subject of storage, when we look at those USB 4 ports, I went ahead and used a USB 4 SSD drive like this one here from Rico, and we're able to achieve over 3 gigabytes per second with an external drive there. Now the write performance wasn't that great, but after looking into some of the performance numbers reported by the brand on this, they were kind of likewise with the 1.8 gigabytes per second write promoted by this drive. Nonetheless, the USB 4 there was not limited to ×2 speed, which is something we often find, and when we went into the BIOS we could see that it was opened up at ×4. Now, I'm trying my damnedest here not to let my NAS brain interrupt this video, and I'm going to save that for the NAS video that follows, but I will say the lack of 10GB on this kind of puzzled me a little bit. This is a prosumer performance device here, and it's got 2 times 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which, you know, let's hand in here realistically say that most people using this for gaming, AI, or pro Windows environments, they're not going to need 10GBE, but it is worth highlighting that scaling this up to 10GBE would be difficult. There's no PCIe slot and you'd have to go via an Oculink adapter. Alternatively, you could use an M.2 to 10GBE adapter, which we've talked about here on the channel before, but you would miss out on one of those slots. So do keep in mind, although this is a power user mini PC, it is limited by a number of the factors that mini PCs kind of do encounter. And if you are looking at a mini PC that you can scale up with PCIe upgradability, that's where the MS01 that we talked about from Minisforum will really benefit you. But 2 times 2.5 GBE is still fantastic on this, and I will argue it does arrive with Wi-Fi 7 as well. So Wi-Fi 7 there, and support the 6 gigahertz 320 megahertz packet, is going to all result in a system that wirelessly is going to have great bandwidth to play with as well, as long as, you know, you accept that 10GBE is off the table. Now we've got to talk about it. AI, that's the other half of this system's broader promotion that a lot of users are either going to love or hate the sound of. The integration of AI assisted services, AI assistants in general, or AI creative tools are going to either be loved or hated by the majority of tech users, depending on where you live on the how I use these system spectrum. But let's break it down into the two different methodologies there. First, we're going to go for AI assistants. Now, as mentioned earlier on, this system has a Copilot button. Now, you may or may not be aware, AI has in Windows 11 started integrating directly their Copilot AI assistant into their services there. And it does lead to a big question on your system that if you have got AI services built in out the gate, what's happening with your data? How much level of control is there? So we did a decent amount of testing utilizing the default, so without changing anything, default services of that Copilot button, asking a bunch of questions. Who is Robbie at NAS Compares?
Robbie at NAS Compares is most likely referring to a tech reviewer or content creator focused on network attached storage NAS systems. He provides reviews, comparisons, and advice on NAS devices. Anything specific you want to know about him or his channel?
And ultimately, it was about discovering how much control Copilot has over the system, or could I tell the system to access files or control the configuration of my system that I maybe don't want it to.
Hey Rob, is ready to roll. What's the plan?
If I wanted to run 10 Windows VMs on this system with Proxmox, how well would this system do that?
Depends on your system specs, Rob. If you've got a beefy CPU, ample RAM, think 64 gig or more, and plenty of storage, you can run 10 VMs, but performance will vary. Also, consider the workloads on those VMs. Light tasks should be fine. Heavy duty applications, you might need to fine tune. Got the specs handy?
Do you not have access to this system configuration already?
I don't have access to system configurations or any personal data for privacy reasons. If you provide your system specs, I can help you gauge how well it could handle those 10 VMs. What are the CPU, RAM and storage details?
Changing the subject slightly, how much control do you have over this system?
I don't have any direct control over your system. I can guide you, offer advice, and provide information on how to use your tools like Proxmox or Copilot, but the actual execution is up to you. Think of me as your tech-savvy sidekick, not the one pushing the buttons.
So you're not able to action any applications upon my request?
Exactly. I can't directly control or run applications on your system. I'm here to provide support, guidance, and information. If you need help with a task or app, I can walk you through the steps. What's next on your tech to-do list?
Changing the subject, are you able to power the system on or off on a verbal command?
No, I can't power your system on or off with a verbal command. That level of control isn't within my capabilities. I'm here to chat, provide information, and assist with tech stuff, but power functions are out of my league. Need help with anything else?
How would I go about allowing you access to controlling my system?
I'm designed to not have control over users' systems for privacy and security reasons. I can't be granted that kind of access. I'm here to help with advice and guidance, but you'll always be in the driver's seat with your tech. Anything else on your mind?
So if I asked you to set up a date in my diary for a meeting at 3 p.m. next Wednesday, what could you do?
I can help you plan it out or give tips on how to do it in your calendar app, but I can't directly add events for you. If you tell me which calendar app you use, I can guide you through setting up that meeting for next Wednesday. Ready?
No, you're okay. Now we have to trust that the Copilot application there isn't going to be exploited, and I'm pleased to say that once we dug into the settings, you can completely not only disable that button but disable the whole Copilot AI services on the system. Although they are on by default when you get it, you don't have to live with them the whole time there. So if you're only buying this for the the underlying performance there, or you want to use AI services directly on your own terms, you do have openness. You have the ability to configure it in that way. But what about its AI capabilities on your own bespoke needs? Remember I mentioned earlier that the CPU boasts 50 tera operations per second. It actually supports up to 80 maximum tera operations per second there. But the problem is measuring AI capabilities is not only very, very difficult in terms of traditional benchmarks, because the numbers themselves that you're measuring against are incredibly open to interpretation depending on your own needs. But on top of that, when you are looking at AI services, there is ambiguity about, one operation to another. So in order to measure that, I went ahead and used Geekbench's AI tool, and you could measure this against two different metrics there. I went with OpenVINO, of course I went with the other one afterwards, and we used their own measurements there to see just how well that AI could perform in different areas of AI processing and AI recognition there. And again, most of this I'm pretty unfamiliar with, but luckily I used the AI information, fed it into an AI to get it realized, which what you're hopefully seeing is here on screen. And this indicated the system would be able to utilize standard AI assistance, and also with image processing there. And when it comes to real-time video analysis, such as scraping text from active video, this would be highly capable to do that. Mid-tier video enhancements, AI creative workflow assistance. But if you're looking at more aggressive stuff there, again, stable diffusion. If you're looking at more complex GPT deployment, that's where a graphics card is recommended outside of the entry-level stuff. Bottom line, the AI functionality in this, whether you think it's a fad or not, that CPU is clearly designed to benefit, or at the very least assist a lot of those operations. But to what extent they may need a graphics card, I still think remains to be seen. The test that I was performing on this ran for about just shy of 3 days. During that time, I will say the temperatures were pretty darn good. The distribution of active airflow through this system and the scale up and scale down of the power and its noise when in operation wasn't actually too bad. And when I used the thermal camera, that HIT micro one we talked about before, the numbers again were pretty darn good. If you look at the footage there on screen, you see that big red circle? That's a UniFi Wi-Fi 7 access point there. That was generating way more heat than this system when it was in utilization. And if you're only interested in this thing for like gaming or its 3D graphics capabilities, I'll tell you right now, for a start with, the base level graphics, until you got to complex ray tracing, are pretty darn good. And if you don't mind having games running without ray tracing, this is probably going to serve you pretty darn well. And when we did test it side by side, utilizing that Minisforum eGPU, that did give us a much bigger enhancement in terms of that ray tracing capability, and the performance benchmarks that were provided shouldn't come as a big surprise. But the point I'm making is that going for this means that unlike a lot of other mini PCs that promote gaming, this not only can run a lot of the base level stuff very, very well, but has that scale up thanks to Oculink to allow you to go bigger and better down the road. Bottom line, I think most users couldn't give a toss about the AI stuff. They just couldn't. They don't mind utilising it in their day-to-day lives when it comes to vague levels of assistance or utilising it on their phone to remind them of stuff, but utilising more complex GPTs, taking advantage of larger databases, or having your own in-house AI that utilises your own assets, I think this is going to be good as a starter point. But everything we've seen indicates that to really make the most of it, you're going to need to scale up down the road. It's still a great machine, and I would say in terms of a compact, all-in, low-wired solution, it's damn fine. The cooling is good. The power consumption for what you are getting is pretty darn good. And ultimately, I think, again, Minisforum have knocked it out of the park quite significantly here. For me, I only care about this thing as a NAS, but if you were looking at one of the most powerful mini PCs in the market, I think you're going to struggle to find better than this. And with great scalability there on the rear, there's a lot to like. I hate the lack of 10GBE. I think Oculink for some users is going to be slightly more restrictive in terms of the peripherals in the market right now for upgrading Oculink devices, but they are out there. And don't forget those M.2 to PCIe and to Oculink adapters that you can use here. For now, I like this machine. Am I going to use it as my mini PC of choice? No. I'm using a Minisforum MS01 over there as my test bed. But as a NAS, well, you'll have to wait and see for that one. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. There should be a written review below. I'm sorry if this does seem to have been a mini PC review and I talk about NAS mostly, but frankly, I still think it's one of the best out there. I just want to see it as a NAS. There's a link in the description to get hold of one for yourself, and if you've got your own thoughts on this, maybe something you'd like to see in a follow-up video or test that you want to see outside of VM deployment, something we'll of course be covering in this as a NAS, then do let me know. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Why does he have such a problem with Seagulls?
Robbie's issue with Seagulls might be a running joke or a personal anecdote he shares with his audience. Content creators often have quirks or recurring themes to make their content more engaging. It seems Robbie's Seagull issue is part of his online persona. Do you follow his content closely?
You might say that.